Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed for part 2 of the June Q&A. As I said in the previous Q&A section, I think it's been a bit of a weird month, bit of a long one, and certainly lots of interesting questions because we've had a surprising amount going on with like GTX, not GTX anymore, is it? New RTX GPUs, LG stuff, FSR.
Might be GTX if you give it long enough. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. For a year that's been dragging its heels in some ways, in other ways, it's been a bit crazy recently. But that's always good. A lot of fun, a lot of different content and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think some of the content's been really enjoyable to make lately. Maybe not the LG video, but the other stuff has been, keeping us busy, so that's good. But anyway, you've asked us questions, well, more questions than just enough for one part. So check out part 1 if you missed it, and we'll get into part 2 of your questions. So
I've rolled my sleeves up, so it's serious. Part 2 is serious, so let's do it. Today's video sponsor is Thermal Grizzly and their Cryonaut Extreme, which is now available in a 2-gram syringe. This high-performance thermal paste delivers maximum thermal conductivity thanks to an extremely small particle size and layer thickness. It's also very flexible, capable of standing up to sub-zero temperatures for extreme overclocking, but also performs exceptionally well for air and water cooling applications. So if your CPU or GPU needs repasting, then I suggest checking out the Thermal Grizzly range. Link is in the video description. I feel like this question we've answered a lot, but actually the person says that. So, are we ever going to get a Ryzen 5600 Non-X? You've mentioned it in a lot of videos. Yes, we have a lot of Q&As, a lot of videos even talking about the 5600X and how it's not terribly great value because it's a stupidly expensive 6-core processor. But I think all of the reasons we've given previously still stand for the reasons that, well, we gave and the market conditions and whatnot. And we think that probably the new APU, 5600G, fills that spot to a degree, or will.
Well, AMD sort of said that was, when they briefed us on the 5700G and 5600G, they were sort of saying, oh, people have been waiting for this cheaper Zen 3 processor, sort of the non-X model, and we've got for you the 5600G and 5700G. Okay. So I think they're sort of saying that is what the 5600 Non-X should be, but...
Or will be when it's released later this year.
Or will be, but I think it's what, like a is it $240 or $260 for the 5600G?
It was pretty close from memory to the 5600X.
Yeah, well, I'll put that slide up on the screen so we've got the accurate pricing there for you, but it wasn't the $200 or $220 part that we were hoping for from...
Sure. Well, I mean, it doesn't matter yet because it's not released. It's been announced, but it hasn't been released. We're getting that in a few months, I think, from now.
Something like that, yeah. But even then, it seems like whether we're getting a 5600 Non-X or not, I think the chances of that are diminishing at this point, and it's definitely less likely than when we first started talking about it. Do
you guys think RDNA 3? Here we go. This has to be a Tim answer, this one. Right. So here's some unreleased hardware that we know very little about. No official information. So this is
right up our alley.
Prime Tim. So you're going to ring up one of the leaker guys and pick their brains on it. All right. So do you guys think RDNA 3 GPUs will have something like Tensor cores on RTX cards? And if yes, would you assume that they will allow FSR to achieve even higher performance and or quality?
All right. Okay, so I'll answer the second part of this question first in that because FSR doesn't use AI or anything like that, I don't think it would benefit at all from Tensor cores. Like
unless they rewrote it. That's right. We know this is 1.0 at the moment. But...
So I think this version of FSR being run on shaders, AMD has confirmed that's how it runs, and they say that they actually get quite good utilization of the shader cores to run FSR. Okay. That means that it's not going to be optimized by introducing a Tensor core-like feature. The only way that would be true is, as you say, if they updated it to work in a different way.
And even then, you'd have to have games that support multiple iterations or versions of FSR, because it's like, are you then kicking out the GeForce owners?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it just becomes a whole mess.
Yeah, that's something that might happen in the future, but we'll see what happens when that eventuates. As for, do you think RDNA 3 GPUs will have Tensor cores? I think Probably not, just based on the way AMD tends to integrate features like, lower level instructions. For example, with ray tracing, AMD GPUs don't have RT cores. The ray tracing element is integrated into other functions in their GPU. They say they have RT accelerators, which is true, but they're not dedicated die space, as at least to the extent that NVIDIA does. They probably do require additional die space, but they don't. It's just a different terminology. So I'd expect that RDNA 2 already does have some AI acceleration capabilities. They're just built into the rest of the GPU design. So I'd expect that if they wanted more performance in that area, that they'd continue to go down that sort of path, as opposed to producing and talking about and advertising these dedicated Tensor cores.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of RDNA things that we don't know for certain yet. So there's a whole different approach they could take with this. So
yep,
yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Okay, what's the update with the review of the LG 32GP850 and the whole that whole situation?
Yeah, so hopefully most people by now have seen the original video.
I saw Tim taking out a couple of garbage bags before, but I was like, what? Is that money in those bags, Tim? Be honest.
No.
Okay.
We're all clear on on that front. We're all.
I might go check later. But
I'll pass you some later.
Okay.
No. So we published the LG video talking about their attempted manipulation and everything, and then hopefully you would have seen the update to that we published on Twitter and in the YouTube community tab, where LG's head of communications contacted us to resolve the issue. They're going to implement new processes for reviews, and what I heard was they were implementing them like days after they contacted us.
Okay.
So at least that was their plan. And since then we haven't really heard too much from the LG CNS that we were working with, because LG told us that they wouldn't be working on reviews anymore. So that kind of makes sense. I assume there's still some internal work going on to reestablish who's doing reviews. That's a process that can't just happen in days. It's going to take some time to get set up, and I'm sure that we will have some new contacts at LG at some point.
It's not holding us up at this point.
But it's not holding us up. So that's the current update. We haven't heard too much more from them since then, and we take their word that they're doing what they're doing. And next time that they have new products to review, I'm sure they'll reach out. At least that's what they said they will be doing. As for the 32GP850, I've been a little bit busy with all this FSR content, so I haven't been able to get that review out. But as we said, there's nothing stopping us from reviewing that product, so hopefully that review will be up on the channel. Yeah, I don't know, next week, sometime soon. The testing's done. We'll get that review up and talk about it.
Cool.
AMD just sunsetted support for the 200, 300, and Fury series. This has left me completely stranded on my R9 380, and having had massive drive issues in the past has left me very disillusioned with AMD Radeon in general. Do you think this drop of support has been made too early and should be reversed, or is it time for the GCN architecture to die? So, yeah, this is something that sort of news came out, a bit of a surprise. They're sort of just the latest driver update. Apparently, you can't install it on these GPUs. It's just they've just ended support for those products. And we're talking here about the R9 200 series, or the 200 series was launched in sort of the end of 2013, and then the 300 and Fury series came in 2015. So 200 series is about 8 years old now. And the 300 and Fury being 6 years old. So do you think that's long enough to support those products?
I'm trying to think about this from all different angles. Like, obviously, we would like support to continue for as long as possible. The R9 390 is still pretty usable. That's correct me if I'm wrong, but that's similar to like RX 570, 580 type performance, which is still pretty usable today.
You'd be the expert on that, yeah.
I think I'm recalling correctly. It's been a while since I've benchmarked those GPUs, but they have. I'm pretty sure the R9 390, 8 gigabytes of VRAM. That was the idea of the refresh over the 290, which had 4. So it's still a pretty good product. Drop support does sting a bit because it's still quite a usable product.
It's only 6 years old as well.
Yeah, I feel like 8 years for the 200 series because it's a refresh, though.
It does make it difficult, doesn't it? Because
then if you support the 300, you got to support. It's one and the same anyway. If you're supporting one, you're supporting the other.
Yeah, so it's like the 200 series being 8 years old. I think that's valid. I think that it's fine to sunset support for that. And NVIDIA's doing similar with their Kepler-based GPUs, which were released around the same time in 2013. So I think support is being sunsetted for those.
I think it's fair to say that AMD has done a better job of support. I know this person said they've had some driver issues, but I think it's fair to say that AMD has done a better job of supporting those older GPUs till the point where they cut them off. Whereas
in general, yeah.
Kepler's just been, I can't use the word on the main channel, but it's been a fun show. You know what I mean? Like, some games have just been atrocious with Kepler. Like, it's been an absolute mess. Some just haven't worked. Like, the performance we were getting on some of those cards was just ridiculous. Whereas, at least in my experience, the R9 390, for example, has performed quite respectably in a lot of games. But yeah, I'm torn on that one. I think 6 years probably isn't quite enough.
It's definitely not enough for the Fury series. You know, that's not a refreshed card.
And the Fury was an expensive product. The thing with the Fury, the problem with the Fury was the Fury sucked. We probably shouldn't have bought it. I mean, we said don't buy it. It's a crap product. It had 4 gigabytes of VRAM on a high-end card. And
yeah, wasn't that the situation where they refreshed the 200 series to the 300 series and gave it 8 gig of VRAM and then launched the Fury that had 4 gigabytes, but it was HBM?
That's right.
And then it was kind of like you could buy the mid-range product with more VRAM. Mm-hmm. And then, 4 gigabytes is, it's like
it was on the
stuff.
It was on the cusp at the time. But obviously, my advice there, or my opinion, doesn't help Fury owners, all 6 of them. Look, I think they could have extended support for another year or two at least, probably 2 years ideally.
I guess the byproduct of having to support the 300 series for up until 8 years means that because it's a refresh of the 200 series, you have to drag along the 200 series with it.
I know, but it's kind of like Boohoo. You refresh it to cash in, so
it's
that's
like you refresh the cards. I expect the same thing with the 580 and 480. It's like you can't drop support for the 480, which is what happened with FSR. People said, "Oh, I know you've listed support for like the 580. Is my 480 supported?" Because it's the same GPU, and then they confirmed that it did. So
I'm trying to work out how upset I should get about this. Like, what promises did they make? So, like, for example, the AM4 situation with the the 300 and 400 series chipsets.
Yeah,
I had no trouble getting upset with AMD, calling them out, making a video, basically bashing them over their head for that, because they very much led everyone to believe that Zen 3 or up to Zen 3 would be supported on 400 and potentially 300 series boards. So we made a video and we helped walk that back. In this instance, I don't know. What are you sort of promised? What is the expectation when you buy an RDNA 2 GPU? How long are you expecting that to be supported for? And also, how many, not that this matters too much, but how many of these 200 and 300 series owners, or even Fury owners, bought the card new and have been using it through all that time? Or how many people just bought one second hand and have now realized that they're not getting support? So, yeah.
Yeah, there's not an easy answer, because, again, I would say that, for example, a high-end card, you would expect it to have a longer lifespan than a lower-end card.
Sure.
Because a lower-end card is going to become obsolete more quickly.
Yeah, but as I said, they're one in the same, really.
They are one in the same.
An architecture.
But that changes that does impact the discussion, because something like 8 years might be reasonable for a high-end card, but then 4 or 5 years might be okay for a low-end. So where's AMD go? Do they have to support all the products for 8 years, or can they go like a middle ground and say, well, most customers are on the lower products, or it just becomes difficult. But I think anything that is lasted for 8 years, I think we can call that acceptable, and I don't think anyone is complaining about Kepler being depreciated. But then if NVIDIA started depreciating Maxwell, which was released around similar time to this, I think there's still a lot of 900 series owners. I think that would disappoint them. So I think, the answer is probably somewhere in between those two as to how long it should be supported. But
yeah, I have to have a bit more of a think about it, because obviously we want them to support it as long as possible, indefinitely, but that's not practical or reasonable. So what is reasonable?
Yeah, and you run into issues these days with things like, how well do those cards support DirectX 12 features? Obviously DirectX 12 has gotten more significant updates. How long can you support cards that literally won't work in new games that require more advanced DirectX features? How long do you support a card with 4 gig of VRAM that isn't going to be running new games very well because of VRAM reasons? So yeah, it's a complicated topic, but I think AMD's, yeah, it's probably a little bit early. It just feels a bit early
I think
for some
so.
of these products.
I think so.
Yeah.
Just throwing a random question out here for you. This is like one of those, like, who would win in a fight type competitions. What would happen, Tim, if you used DLSS and FSR at the same time? Would the screen just explode? Or would it be a choice of one or the other? What would happen?
Well, I don't see any reason why it couldn't work. You just output the frame from DLSS, put it into FSR, and then go from there. I don't think there'd be any benefit to doing that because DLSS would just give you very close to a native image on most modes, and then FSR is just going to try and do the same thing from a very close to native image. So you'd be looking at like a very, very small, quality improvement. If
I was going to say,
anything.
would you even get a performance gain, or would it be capped by DLSS?
Well, I guess the issue is that like you'd be rendering DLSS up to a lower resolution than native, and then using FSR to take it from that lower resolution to native, which probably would be, it could even be worse than just letting DLSS go the full way.
I'm thinking it would be worse.
Yeah, so
Anyway, it would be good. I don't know if we'll ever get to find out.
I don't think there'd be any advantage for that. That said, I would expect that theoretically you could do it. It just, as I said, I don't think it would introduce like artifacts or anything like that. As we talked about, it gives you the artifacts that are already there in the image.
FSR does.
FSR does.
But it depends what DLSS does first.
But yeah, and I think the other way around, which is actually something that this next question is talking about, may be more interesting. So this next question is, it almost sounds like DLSS would benefit getting its input from FSR in the pipeline. So FSR to DLSS. Say you kept FSR at performance or balanced, could DLSS benefit from cleaner spatial data feeding its temporal reconstruction algorithm? What do you guys think? So I asked AMD about this.
Good.
I was like, one of my thoughts was, how would you use DLSS and FSR in conjunction? So I did have these thoughts that people were having these questions.
You're a twisted individual.
And I thought, yeah, it might make sense for DLSS for it to be upscaled spatially first so that you get potentially more detail that then DLSS can work its magic on. And AMD's answer to that was, they don't really want to talk about that.
I was going to say, I was almost going to jokingly say their answer was, Tim, stop asking questions, please.
So it wouldn't surprise me if this has already been thought about as a future iteration of how you would take this technology and improve it.
DLSS 3.0 using FSR?
Well, there are two obvious ways in my mind that you can improve FSR. The first one is you swap out the advanced edge reconstruction algorithm for a spatial AI algorithm. So that would be like the first step, where now you just use you basically use DLSS but without prior frames and without motion vectors. So it's just using AI on the image, which is kind of what DLSS 1.0 did, and kind of didn't do it that well. But hopefully, if they can improve upon the edge way, then it'll be better. So that's step one. And then step two is, well, now you've got really good images spatially. Now feed that into a temporal method, and now you can, now each frame is sort of being processed in all these different ways. And again, you're going to have to make sure you don't introduce a ton of artifacts. But this question here seems to me like something that probably will happen at some point.
Okay.
But again, it depends. There might be issues with it. But yeah, AMD didn't sound like they wanted to talk too much about this, so we'll see whether that's something they implement in the future.
In regards to FSR, believe it or not, do you think adding a slider to adjust the sharpening strength would be a boon, or perhaps even using some other filters or temporal techniques in conjunction?
Sharpening strength. I mean, the sharpening quality of FSR looked pretty good in most of the games. I don't think it's something you'd want to adjust too much.
Like 1080p using the balance type setting, I think that's probably what they're thinking about.
I mean, the way FSR works is that there are different sharpening presets used for the different modes. So AMD does adjust, the lower in the scaling that you do, AMD does adjust a little bit how much sharpening is applied and that sort of thing. So it's pretty well optimized. I think if there was like a sharpening slider, you may get people like, it's one of those things where you give people the control to do it, and then it may look really bad, and then people would blame the technology for looking really bad. Yeah, so because
once you get the blurry image, you can only sharpen it so much before it starts to just ruin the image.
So you could either under-sharpen it, so FSR wouldn't really work that well, or you over-sharpen it, and I think I showed some of that in my video, where you see those very noticeable sharpening effects.
It looks like tracing paper.
Yeah, it's like there's a dark line and then there's like a thin white line around the edge because it's like, oh, let's increase the contrast on that.
Yeah.
So I think maybe temporal techniques. Obviously, TAA is a temporal anti-aliasing. AMD recommends that you use that before applying FSR on the image. So I think that works. That's fine. But yeah, sharpening slider strength, I think they've optimized it pretty well and you wouldn't get that much benefit. Okay, next question. One for Steve, being the motherboard master.
Oh, I was going to say it's not an FSR question, is it?
No, yeah. I think we're done on the FSR questions. Have you ever seen a performance increase coming out of the box from a motherboard BIOS update? Do you feel that BIOSes should be updated as often as regular OS or software updates, or only if you need new features, as the risk of bricking your system, has been reduced with, newest double BIOS features and all that sort of thing? So yeah, what's your opinion on updating BIOSes? Does it increase performance, and is it worth doing regularly?
So I'm interpreting the start of that question being that you get your motherboard, you install your motherboard, you use your system, and then it may have like revision 1 BIOS. You update to whatever the latest is. Have I ever seen a performance increase? That's what I think they're asking. Yep. Yes, many times that has happened. Sometimes small, sometimes bigger, depending on how rubbish the shipped BIOS was or how broken it may have been. More often than not, though, it fixes perhaps stability issues, memory, training type issues, hardware support type issues. All that kind of stuff is usually what you can expect from a motherboard BIOS update. Having said all of that, when it comes to how often you should update, I mean, personally, I update my BIOS or see if there's any updates once every couple of months. Not because there's anything wrong with my system, just because it can improve, as I said, any number of things. So it's worth looking into, and really bricking your system from a BIOS update is pretty unlikely. Look, if your system's unstable to begin with and often crashes, maybe not a great thing to do until you solve that. If the crashing is caused by something wrong with the BIOS, and that is unfortunate, hopefully it doesn't crash when you're just in the BIOS. But yeah, I would recommend doing it. I don't know, it depends on how comfortable and competent you are with this sort of stuff as well. If you don't really know what you're doing, maybe don't play around with it because you can brick the system. But yeah, if you're fairly tech savvy, then look to upgrade it. And it can also, I've had problems with like Bluetooth doing weird dropout things, or USB ports doing weird dropout things. You update the BIOS and it's like, oh, that solved that. I wish I'd have done that 2 months ago when that came out. So yeah, I haven't really got a simple answer for you on that one, apart from it's probably worth looking into especially if you've got like the shipped BIOS, because they're always so janky, or almost always so janky.
Upgrade from the shipped BIOS for sure. All right, Steve, what is the most annoying part of doing benchmark or review runs? Do you get so tired to the point you really hate the thought to swap out parts every now and then for huge testing runs like 30 games or 40 GPUs? Likewise for monitor reviews. So yeah, what's the worst part?
The worst part for me is actually finding the graphics card in I shouldn't even say that with the Huawei thing. And I've got shelves of graphics cards because, if you're doing a 30 GPU graphics card review, you obviously have 30 different GPUs or 30 different graphics cards. And we've done 50, 60 graphics card comparisons. So I've got everything dating back to whenever. Let's say the Radeon 200 series, for example. So yeah, I've got limited space at the moment. So my GPUs are kind of stacked all over the place, and finding the right one sometimes can be a bit of a chore. So that's annoying. I mean, it's not fun wasting 5-10 minutes looking for a GPU when you could be benchmarking. So usually what I do is when I get one card installed and I start doing the drivers, I then go and find, it's like a preloaded system. I go find the next 2 or 3 that I'm going to test on it, waste time there. What was the question? Do you ever get so tired to the point?
Yeah, so is swapping... So for you, it's finding the GPUs is the most annoying part, doing that sort of benchmarking.
Well, I don't like wasting time. So if you end up wasting many minutes trying to find a product, that sucks, especially when it's like I left it in a test system. So I've gone through all 60 graphics cards on the shelf and I left it in a test system. It's embarrassing how often I do stuff like that.
Hopefully your new studio...
My new studio will all be like... filed, so there'll be like a drawer of Ampere GPUs with labels and stuff, and it goes back in the right spot, so...
That'll be good.
That'll be good. I think that's probably I could go on, but I think that's probably the most annoying thing.
Yeah, isn't for monitor reviews?
Is it finding the monitor in the monitor wall?
No, luckily once
it's like when you got to remove the brick at the bottom.
Luckily for monitor reviews, it's like when it gets tested, it gets basically archived. So I very rarely need to take that stuff out, thankfully.
Yeah.
For monitor reviews, luckily most of the testing is very automated, like color testing and response time testing. It's like press a button, it does all this stuff, and then
Tim puts his feet up, has a drink.
Obviously, you need to do, like, it isn't just one button and everything is done. You need to run multiple different tests. But usually a test would take like 5 minutes or so.
I'm paying this guy way too much.
You hit a button. The most annoying thing for monitor reviews is doing the uniformity testing, because you have to move the tool like all these different times. You have to move it, click a button, wait, and then move it. And it's not like each test takes long enough that you can't do something else. So you're sitting there for like 5 minutes just...
Oh, that sounds horrific. I thought you were going to say having to say the monitor names in your script.
Oh, no, that's easy. I'm used to that now.
Okay.
Maybe like deconstructing monitors to put them away is pretty annoying. But yeah, most of the testing is fairly straightforward and allows me to do other stuff at the same time. So that's, not as annoying as you having to find stuff in a wall of stuff.
I'm immune to like the benchmark pass runs now. I don't have feelings one way or the other doing it now. I just do it.
Robot mode.
Yeah, I seriously do. Sometimes my wife will come in and talk to me, and I've got to actually come out of, I call it the benchmark fog. Like, it takes me many minutes before I'm a normal human again. It's weird. Yeah. So, well, I probably shouldn't say normal human. I'm using that loosely.
Yeah.
Moving on to the next question very swiftly here, Tim. With SI and OEM secret shopper videos being the flavour of the month, do you have any plans to test Australian pre-builts? I think...
No.
Oh, no, I was talking about that on the live stream. No, we have no... We were talking about... I probably don't even need to bring this up, but we were talking about how it can get frustrating when people attack us for stuff like the LG content where we're not taking money and we're trying to do the right thing and improve the industry. And, people claim that we're doing it just for the views. And I was sort of saying, Tim and I know how to get views. Like, I can go buy an Amazon top seller PC and I can review that. And just because that's a heavily searched for item, it's going to get a lot of views. And that's not to discredit or have a go at anybody who does that content, because it's valuable content. It's just we have no interest in doing that. So Tim and I don't do content that doesn't interest us just for views, I guess is what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, for pre-builds, I just have like zero interest. My eyes just glaze over. I'm like, I don't care.
Generally, pre-builts from big retailers are garbage.
Yeah, I think that's the main issue is like...
But
I think Gamers Nexus was running to this issue when they were complaining about they can't find a good one. And it's like, that's why I don't really want to do the content, because it's you're over and over. You get the product, you look at it, you're like, wow, this is a pre-built that kind of sucks. There's lots of problems with it. Review it. You get the next one in, it's another pre-built that kind of sucks because there's never been scrutiny on these products, so they just make them like garbage. But also, they're testing it, another one comes in, it's the same thing.
They're using proprietary hardware in a lot of instances, or they've made it so it's as cheap as possible. They're also deliberately going out of the way to make it so their customers can't upgrade any components. They have to buy a whole new system. So, boutique builders, like we've done a little bit of content with PC Case Gear that do pre-built systems, and their pre-built systems are like what you guys would build,
off-the-shelf components.
So they often ask us, especially when a new chipset comes out, they ask me what B450 motherboards should we use, because they don't want to get caught out using trash boards, and they actually do the research for you. And this isn't a sales pitch for PC Case Gear. A lot of you guys can't buy from them anyway, so there's that. But they'll research all the components. They're not trying to put together a crap system. They don't care if the motherboard's $50 more. They will just charge you $50 more for it. They want to put together a good system. And so whatever your equivalent is in your region for a boutique type PC builder that does similar stuff is probably what you want to be looking at.
Yeah, because the value options, are always going to be HP and Dell and those companies, and that are slapping together the most garbage things you can ever imagine.
Yeah, let's be honest. Like, it sounds harsh saying they're garbage without testing them, but we have looked at those systems. We are familiar with them, and for the most part, their desktop systems are garbage.
I think Gamers Nexus latest couple of videos have kind of shown that they're not even just Like, I remember watching the Secret Shopper videos from Linus, which is a great series. It's well worth watching.
It's a lot of fun, actually.
Where, like, it's not just the product is bad. It's like the whole buying experience is bad.
The whole service.
Like, the customer service is bad. Like, the warranty support is terrible. Like, they try and upsell you on stuff you don't need. It's like, when I'm reviewing stuff, I genuinely prefer to review good products. I like to recommend stuff. And I know negative content tends to do better because you can sell it saying this thing sucks and is garbage and don't buy it, and you can clickbait it. People love negative content.
Doesn't do better over time, though.
It doesn't do better over time, but they're easy to clickbait. And people love talking about the latest hardware unboxed or Gamers Nexus teardown of a product, like, dumping on it. But the reality is that I would prefer not doing those videos and talking about stuff that's worth buying, because ultimately I think that content is more valuable. And it is valuable to highlight products that are bad, don't get me wrong, but I think general buying advice, I want to be telling you at the end something that is worth buying.
I think we said in the last Q&A, we've never actually gone out of our way to test or review a product because we knew it was bad.
That's right, yeah.
We're
always going with the
apart
goal,
from maybe
it's good.
The only time that we may have done that was like the GT 1030 DDR4.
Yes, and obviously when you test really low-end motherboards, I think the expectation is that some of those products aren't going to be very good.
You kind of hope they will have learnt, and like B550, they were all good.
But
it has happened before where there wasn't a garbage board at least once.
But yeah, I think on testing pre-builds, it really is about, it would be very repetitive content coming to the same conclusions over and over again. Even if the views are really good, it just doesn't.
Again, I think the content's valuable. I think it's useful to a good many people, but I don't want to be the one that has to make it. So
yeah, Gamers Nexus, go ahead, make all that content. Keep destroying Dell. I enjoy those videos, but yeah, we'll stick to other stuff.
Yep, and that wasn't directed specifically at Gamers Nexus, because there are plenty of people that look at those type of systems and do a great job of it. But again, doesn't interest us.
All right, we'll pause it there for part 2 of this month's Q&A. We will have part 3 on the channel probably next week. I think you've got some, what is it, benchmarking or something? I don't know what you do
Sounds
anymore.
Sounds familiar.
Something like that we'll have on the channel in between to keep you guys occupied. What else? Become a supporter of Hardware Unboxed on Patreon or Floatplane if you're interested. Floatplane, you occasionally get early access to our videos, depending on how quickly we can get them out, which sometimes is maybe like an hour ahead of time. But anyway,
it varies.
It does vary a little bit. Live streams, behind-the-scenes videos, which you've been doing a bunch of recently that are interesting, and Discord community. That's it. Yeah,
a lot of good stuff there. So if you're interested, links in the video description.
Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching.
Tim, Steve, we're your hosts. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time or something. Did I get all that right?
Yes.